Hello, my name is Janet Clayton. This is Tangled Jaguar. This is my disclaimer. My stories are fiction. Any correlation to reality is merely a coincidence. Tangled Jaguar, Chapter 1. Michael Cross was sitting at the easel dabbing the canvas with a light solvent to clean away the years of soot that had accumulated. The portrait, a great masterpiece, had sat next to a fireplace in the parlor and was badly damaged. It was hard to see the beauty of the piece in its present condition, as he cleaned away a variety of colors jumped from the canvas. Although the work was tedious, he enjoyed the rewarding feeling of restoring a lost treasure. Acclaimed for his ability to restore works of art to their former glory, some art was so badly damaged that he became the artist. His reputation was such that he always tried to stay true to the original work. It was during this grueling cleanup that the phone rang. Hello? Yes, this is Michael Cross. What? You say it's not able to be moved. Oh, a cave. No, I haven't worked much in natural environments. Mostly my work has been in museums and, of course, my own studio. Yes, I have been able to x-ray paintings and find the hidden works behind the top layers. Well, I can't say I'm not intrigued. How long would I need to be there? I looked over at the piece on the easel, taunting me with the time it was sucking up. Yes, I can pack and be ready by the 5th of the month. Great. Send all the details to my email, and I'll see you in Mexico. No, thank you. This seems like a great opportunity to see the area, and I have never worked in a cave, so it will be interesting. Do I need to bring a bag of equipment? I already knew before I asked that I would be bringing my bag of tricks and that I had accumulated over the years. Chapter 2. After traveling by air for 13 hours, I landed and quickly realized I was no longer in a land of plush comforts. The colors and language were different. I knew my Spanish was rusty, but I managed to hire a taxi, paying way too much, I'm sure. I made it to the hotel and checked in, sat down on the bed, and with a sigh looked around. This was going to be the last comfort I would know for a while. After I took a shower and turned on the TV for white noise, I could feel the sparseness of the decor. The hotel had put up an abstract painting, but little effort could be found in its choosing. When I woke, I packed what I thought was most important in the jungle: sunscreen and bug spray. We were to meet at the Mercado. The taxi driver knew where we were going, and we traveled through the streets, swaying lanes as if skiing down a snowy bank. I use this example only because the taxi driver tells me of his dream of how to see the snow before he dies. He also questions me about driving in such conditions. He has seen many YouTube videos and fears he would not be able to drive in the U.S. I tell him there's no problem unless you want to stop, that people who drive in the ice know to stay away from the other cars. I tell him I personally love to drive in the ice as it gives me a little thrill along a regular route. I got there as they were checking the equipment and batteries, all the things we would be taking with us. It was a dense pack complete with a makeshift refrigeration system to keep ice. Then I was asked in Spanish if I'd ever driven a bus before. I didn't really understand that I was going to be driving the bus into the jungle, but I nodded. No, I hadn't ever driven a bus. I must have had a stunned look on my face as they handed me the keys and wished me good luck. No one else was going to be on the bus. No, I was driving the bus to the base camp alone. Now, I must say, the bus was of a particular nature as to wonder why we were using it at all. It was rusty and the seats were plywood. To sit down, one lowered themselves carefully as to not get a scrape in an uncomfortable place. So I started driving down the road. It was all rutted and hardened dirt. The bus didn't act like it would make the journey. I don't know why or how I got the idea that I should drive a bus of this sort down a dirt road. I wasn't concerned about getting lost. There seemed to be only one road. I open the windows in an attempt to catch a breeze, but no breeze hits me as I'm driving down the road, and I go bumping and swaying. I remember the old man telling me in broken English that the road ends at the camp. I drive for what seems longer than 4 hours and reach the end of the road. I know it's the end of the road because there's a tree in the middle with duct tape around it with the words in English written, "End of the road." I look around for what is supposed to be a camp. All I see are trees. I drink some of the hot water I have with me and pour the rest down my back. I felt it was best not to leave the area, hoping someone would turn up. So I decide to pick a spot on the ground and sit it out. I grab my pack and start to draw some of the plant life around the area. It's hot and muggy, and the bus was without air conditioning. I start to question the wisdom of this endeavor. What am I doing here? Oh, I know. I'm longing for my temperature-controlled world. I hear a motor and think to myself, it must be them. About 4 guys jump out of a Jeep. They have guns in their hands and they're yelling a bunch of stuff I have no way to comprehend. They give me a look of disgust and go into the bus and start throwing some of the bags and equipment out the bus door. I'm not sure what's going on, but the guns do make me stay quiet and let them do whatever they want. Then this lady came out of nowhere and she went off on them, yelling just as much as they. And when they point the gun at her, she just grabs it away and throws it on the ground, uttering some insulting words back at them. The lead man then gestures for everyone to get back into the truck. The guy who's pointed the gun at the lady sheepishly picks it up and goes for the Jeep. She turned to me in English and says, "So you're the artist?" She's beautiful, with dark black hair and amber eyes. She's obviously fearless. I'm Crystal Bell, one of the many archaeologists that you will be working with here. Let's get your gear to your hut. I grab my pack and follow her, and just like one leaf is moved and the whole encampment is invisible. I could see that we were in some sort of depression, and I asked her about it. She laughed and said we were actually inside a palace, and that they were excavating it. I looked around again. I could see some rock behind the thick foliage, but I certainly didn't see a palace of any sort. A man came out of one of the huts. Seeing me, he yells, "The cold beer is here!" And a group of guys walk down to the bus. I learned later that the only time the beer is cold is when the bus arrives. My hut is just that, a small room made of tree branches and a thatched roof. It didn't look that bad, really. I had camped in the woods before, and I proceeded to comfort myself with the memories of summer camp. Crystal showed up at my door and told me if I wanted to eat, I better get down to the mess tent. The meal was a little strange to me. I didn't recognize much of it, but the beans and the tortilla. Otherwise, I couldn't tell you what I ate. It did not cool off in the night, and the bugs congregated at the camp lights. The multitude of insects seemed unimaginable, and I didn't recognize many of them. My cot was draped in mosquito netting, and I sat inside the netting looking out at the creatures that crawled on the outside. To say I was uncomfortable would be an understatement. The cockroach I saw was the size of a mouse. I couldn't even lie down without triple-checking the bedding. Then this loud screech sound let out. It started low with a grunt noise and then progressed to a howl. I about jumped up out of my skin. But they did say there would be howling monkeys, and I gently let myself back down into the bed, and I must have slept because I awoke to the morning. As I stepped from the cot, a black mass started from my wash basin. I inspected a little closer, glad that I had not seen it the night before, as closing my eyes was hard enough. I noticed that the communal toilets did not have seats on them, and guessed that a seat would be a perfect place to hide for one of these creatures. Chapter 3. Crystal came up and asked, "Are you ready to see the cave?" I was as ready as I would ever be. Down the trail behind her I followed. She was quite a stunner, and I didn't see any gear, so we were expecting a simple walk into a cave. What movie had I been watching? Brush was moved aside, and a small opening was visible by the rocks. She slid down to the ground and turned over on her stomach going in the hole feet first. I could do nothing but follow suit. It was rough, and I was sure I had scratched my belly quite badly. Feeling for some ground that might be below, I made this swimming kick. Crystal grabbed my feet and guided them to a rock that I was to perch upon. It was dark except for a small light that was on a hard hat that Crystal had donned without me noticing. She handed me one in the cramped area, and she swiveled into another small opening. It opened up a bit, and she gestured to a large rock appeared to have paint on it. "This is it," she said. "Isn't it great?" I looked. I didn't really see greatness, but I did see paint. I tried to focus on the rock and see what was there. It seemed to be a tangle of flowers. I looked at it closely and asked if this was the painting I was to restore. She said no, but they hoped that I would take a look at it and consider preservation methods. I told her it would be easy to apply a fixative to the paint that would keep it dry and safe from the water and dirt damage. She asked if I brought the fixative with me. I hadn't. She seemed a little miffed and nodded and moved into the rocks a bit more. "The painting's this way." A small cavern opened up into a larger one with a pool of water in the middle. I saw a painting of some magnitude on a rock wall. It was layered, and I could see that they had asked me here for good reason. This was not going to be some project of preservation and reconstruction. It was going to be a big project. So I came up with a plan telling her I would return tomorrow and take multiple pictures of the painting from different angles. Sometimes you can see more with this method. We returned to camp, and dinner was served up at the mess tent. Around the table sat a large group of people. Evan was a cryptologist, and his part in this was to read the glyphs that were found. Jim did the excavation of the site and moved heavy objects out of the way, piecing together a palace that had once been. Dale was the money. You could tell right away he was the money because he had a certain comfort about his person even in this heat. They all told tales of how excavations had started and how the antiquities thieves thought this was their territory. They were quite terrifying at first, but Crystal showed up and told them who was boss. There wasn't much trouble. They all laughed at how afraid they were of her. Apparently she had some charm that frightened them. Each morning I awoke and grabbed my gear and walked toward the cave. I was taking pictures in the morning and drawing out what I could in the afternoon. Crystal usually went with me, doing some exploration of the cave while I photographed the mural. To say the area is hot and muggy is an understatement, so at the end of the day Crystal and I would head off to the cenote in the cave to cool off. Chapter 4. Next day, with a little confidence, I set out for the cave. I carried with me all that I would need for the day, including a snack. When I was setting up the camera, I heard a noise at the mouth of the cave, and I called out, "Crystal, is that you?" But it was not. It was the group of men that had appeared the first day I had arrived. They again started yelling and showing off the guns. One of the men grabbed me and shoved me toward the cave opening. Taking the hint, I twisted up through the hole. They loaded me and my equipment onto the truck, and off they drove down the dirt road. My Spanish wasn't adept enough to communicate what I wanted to know, like, "Why are you kidnapping me?" They drove me up to an encampment, and I was put in a small tent with one of the men standing outside the flap. They definitely had kidnapped me. Nothing to do but sit down on the ground and wait for what would come next. After some time had passed, an older gentleman came into the tent. He looked tired and anxious. Apologizing in English for his men's behavior, he told me that he was an archaeologist and collector of Maya artifacts, and he proceeded to tell me his position on the keeping of precious objects. He said as an archaeologist many times he had found objects with glyphs and drawings that somehow had vanished into museums and or chambers never to be seen again. It's true antiquity thieves take objects and sell them on the black market, but he wasn't sure this wasn't happening in the museums as well. He asked what my feelings were. I told him that I worked for many museums restoring paintings, so that they could keep their beauty for years and be shared with the world. He then asked what I thought about private collectors. Specifically, do you think it's wrong for private collectors to have great works of art, or should all great works be kept in a museum? I answered carefully. I knew of situations where private collector didn't care for the work as it should have been done. Private collectors are great if they truly appreciate the work and care for it, but some art is just passed down through the family, and the person owning it doesn't even see it. They pass it each day as if it were wallpaper, whereas museums gave many people the chance to see art that would never be available to them if all art was privately collected. He thanked me and left. I heard him say as the guard outside that I should be let go in the morning. Crystal noticed that Michael didn't make it to dinner and started to ask people when they had seen him last. It was clear that he'd gone back to the cave to take more pictures of the mural. She took off down the trail. When she got to the cave, she could tell a truck had been there and a scuffle had occurred. She knew where their camp was, and she knew they were armed. She went back to the base camp and told the first person she saw that she was going to go get him back. She walked quietly to the back of the encampment and watched as the men moved about. It was clear that one of the tents was checked on regularly and food was taken in rather than that person coming out to eat with the rest of them. This is where they would find Michael. She slowly moved to the back of the tent and with a sharp knife slit the back of the tent. Michael smiled and started to say something, but she shushed him and led him out the back of the tent. There wasn't very far away when they heard the yell and the alert of their lost captive. Crystal and Michael picked up the case and hurried back to camp. Chapter 5. The next day, when I headed toward the cave, Crystal was quick to join me. It seemed I had a bodyguard, and a beautiful one at that. I said, "It is always this exciting around here?" She laughed and said antiquity thieves were a real problem and people had been killed. There is a lot of money out there for the right pieces. Almost every time they came to a site, the looters had beat them. Turns out the only one she beat them at was this one that we were working on now. Last year, a young man had joined the team and was very productive as he had find after find. One day, with a funny look on his face, he said, "Golden Jaguar," as if to garner some response. She didn't know what was up, but she said we are all wrong about the Maya. The Snake King did not rule over the entire area. He said he had found evidence that the Mayan political system was far more feudal in nature, and that many different lords were looking after their own territories. The next day he was gone, and so were some of his finds. Evidence had supported the idea of a feudal system with the murals in Bonampak. There was a painting of men of high rank standing in a line with a manner of boredom on their faces, smoking and talking and waiting for an audience with the awa. It was true that many individuals of the area of royal nature, and no one knew how it all played out. After he had left, the subject was dropped, and the camp went back to excavating the palace. It was hard to accept the loss of objects, as each one could have the answer to puzzles that they had been working on for years. Crystal and I were becoming close friends, and each day as the heat climbed, we would walk down to the cave and swim in the cenote. Our campmates would give knowing looks as we sat together talking with each other. It was one of these times at the cenote that I bumped into a wall and a stone came loose. Behind it was another stone. The stone was carved and the wall behind it had a painting of good condition, and it seemed to go deeper into the wall. Crystal and I looked at the stone that had fallen out of the niche. There was a jaguar, water lilies, the Lord symbol, and other glyphs carved into the stone. As we looked, we also noticed the spots on the jaguar were formed into the shape of a gold glyph. Crystal's eyes were wide with excitement, and she said, "We have to take this back to Evan. He can tell us what it says on the sides." What was the stone trying to say? Many Maya glyphs were stacked or layered images. Could the glyph be saying that the king had a jaguar that was golden in color? That didn't really make any sense, since most of the jaguars had this golden coloring. Were the lilies golden, and therefore the mention of the gold located the place where this king ruled? We looked at each other, wondering if we were thinking the same thing. Was this a Jah named Golden Jaguar? If so, where was the glyph for that? And where was the Golden Jaguar's throne? Evan looked at the stone, trying to make out the glyphs, holding the stone as a sacred object, carefully turning it toward the camp light. He took a picture, and they agreed to call the museum and turn in the stone. All or some other group of the archaeologists may have answers to what they were looking for. As with many of the Mayan finds, it was a collaborative effort to decipher glyphs, sometimes with multiple teams working the same area. One team would have the answers to questions that the other teams were still struggling with. There was no animosity between the groups. Everyone was working toward a common goal of understanding. When Michael and Crystal went to the museum to show the stone glyph they had been found, they were met with red tape. They had called the museum. They were told to process and document the location of where the object was found, complete with pictures. At the museum, however, it was business as usual. The man at the counter pulled out a form and started to fill it out. His hatred of the task was written all over his face. Then he carefully put the stone in a box and labeled it. Michael could see from the long hallway behind him that this object would most likely be stored and never seen again. It was a misfortune, as it may have information of a new dynasty. What was the point of taking objects here, when he knew the archaeologist that was working in this area would use it to find the city? The archaeologist would put it in a box never to be seen again. He would have savored its presence, looked at it over and over again, shared images with other teams. Chapter 6. This was a great disappointment, and discontent festered. When we got back to base camp, we shared the cold beers we stacked on the ice of the regular supplies. Everyone was eager to hear about this decipherment of the piece. We had to tell them the bad news of its tag and storage. We never met the official archaeologist. Then we proceeded to get really drunk. It was in this state that a man approached me and told me, archaeologist and collector of Mayan artifacts, would be very much like to hear more about the stone, perhaps see the pictures of the stone we found. I remembered the collector in the jungle and what he said about precious objects in museums. I knew the collector would have cherished the object and cared for it. It would not be put in a box, but in a glass case, with everyone who visited seeing the love that it garnered in its owner. The next day, as we walked toward the cave, we talked about what would happen now that something new was found. Would a team of native archaeologists come and take everything we found, trampling the area? Would the objects be safe with these people? Crystal sighed and said she really didn't know what to think anymore. Going back to where they found the stone, we looked upon the wall. I pulled away stone after stone with ease, as it was always meant to be uncovered. As I cleared the stones, another large painting in good condition appeared. Crystal laughed in disbelief, and tears streamed down her face. The mural of a jaguar lay hidden, where no one had seen it for 1,000 years. Perhaps the stones, in perfect condition. Again she noticed the spots on the jaguar were fashioned into glyphs of gold, and beautiful water lilies intertwined it. A stone box lay in the right corner of the piece. Michael moved the stone lid away, and there it was. It wasn't just a golden jaguar, but intertwined was carved jade to look like water lilies, and the flowers were made of white carved seashells. It was work of art like no other, craftsmanship of this kind in a period of time that was hard to comprehend. How did they carve it so beautifully? A jewel measured about 11 inches high, and this kitty was plump and oh so heavy. From a mural they could see that it was not meant to be held, but to stand along beside the golden jaguar king, a symbol of his power and wealth. Crystal read the name out. Golden Jaguar of the Water Lilies. The Golden Jaguar of the Water Lilies. There was a great time of unrest, and the people, desperate to be fed, tried to understand why their gods did not save them, trying to remember the old ways, to write what little they could remember. But it was a jumble of words and fairy tales. Little of it could be deciphered after the civilization collapsed. All knowledge of their faith left unknown by their descendants. Men went out to hunt with the local wildlife for food. A young man peered into the grass to find the sound of screams and thrashing coming from the water. It was a jaguar completely entangled in water lilies. The jaguar let out a scream that sounded like help. The young man sped up to the bank of the cenote and got a better look. The jaguar looked at him in the eye and said, "Save me and I will make you a wa." There was a tree branch nearby, and I grabbed it and moved it across the water. The jaguar pulled himself from the water and looked at him again with thanks in his eyes. "Remember me, and it will be so." In shock from the words spoken, he backed away. Behind him, a large hunting party, who had also been in the area, heard the screams and the jaguar speak. Among them was the current lord of the area. He spoke with a tone of authority and said, "I cannot go against such magic. I see with my own eyes. Rather than fight you for what will already be yours in the end, I now adopt you as my son and heir." All the men of the hunting party had witnessed the jaguar speaking and agreed this was the correct action. The Lord then proclaimed, "You, from this day forward, will be known as Golden Jaguar of the Water Lilies." Tears were still streaming down Crystal's face. I looked at Crystal and asked, "What now?" And Crystal stopped crying and looked at me with a serious stare. "Don't tell anyone what we found. If they know this, they will descend upon the area and it will be taken from us. The only person who really respects the find with any interest in history and not the gold is the older man you met in the thieves' camp. I think we should contact him and sell the object to him. He will study it and put it in the information he finds out into the world to share. This golden statue will be in his good hands with a true accounting of its provenance. And Michael, we're going to be very rich." Watercliffs. I wasn't a thief. I was a restorer of artwork. Here, this rock with this beautiful golden statue with jade and shell. I knew if we took it to a museum, it would be the toast of the archaeological world. "Golden statue found in ancient Mayan cave." The news would report. Yet I also knew that many people of all walks of life would then come into the area and change it forever. I didn't know what my morals said about it all after seeing the last find go into a box and stacked on a shelf, never to be seen again. I agreed with Crystal not to let anyone know about what we had found for now. I lay in bed and wondered just how much the piece was worth to the old archaeologist and how he would let the world know about the history and the value of such an exceptional piece without consequences. When I woke up, Crystal was waiting for me. She was excited, and we went off toward the cave as we usually did. When we got out of sight of the camp, Crystal grabbed my arm and said, "Let's go talk to the old guy and poke some information at him to see if he bites." Crystal did all the talking and told the old man that we had a piece of great value both in dollars and history. He was very interested and asked what we could want for it. 12 million, she said coolly. He sighed. He knew she was educated in the subject of antiquities and said, "Yes, I want it." We didn't stay there long after he said yes. As we walked back to the cave, Crystal said that we would have to plan this carefully. We would both have to stay in the area even after the objects was published, as not to raise suspicions to ourselves. I still had to apply fixatives and protect the paintings they called me down here for. Looking as if we were doing our daily work, every day seemed like an eternity. We moved the statue to a new location just in case the thieves working for the archaeologists would get it. When we were told our camp of the new mural that was found, the excitement of the camp was uncontainable. Everyone took their turn going down and looking at it. Evan took pictures to decipher the glyphs around the edges. Everyone, it turns out, did not want to inform the authorities just yet. It was a perfect situation. No one wanted to tell anyone. They all wanted a chance to study it first. Crystal handled all the negotiations like she had planned to do this all along. I watched in fear as I wondered just how far she might go for 12 million. We had become lovers the night we found the stone, and now she was attentive and strange. I did not expect my beautiful archaeologist to become a thief of relics. After finishing my photographs of all the murals, I was able to work at the camp drawing out the murals and coloring them as I once did. It was truly beautiful work. I mused at the loss of a great artist in this time, no one ever knowing their names. I completed the work quickly, thinking I may have $6 million at the end of this miserable hot location. I knew I could do odds and ends in my studio with the comfort of Chinese food. As I started to gather my thoughts of flights and packs, I realized I hadn't seen Crystal all day. I rasped around and got my food, but no one had seen her. I now was thinking she ran off with the money, and I will most likely never see her again. I put my things into the bus that has been packed with the artifacts and garbage. Yes, it's garbage. We can't leave it in the jungle. I drive back to the Mercado where the man who gave me the keys to the bus is waiting. He has a big smile on his face, and he tells me Crystal said to dine with him at the Z Beach Club at 6 p.m. I wasn't expecting this, but my flight wasn't out until tomorrow. The restaurant is a paradise. She sits waiting for me with what seems a glow around her. Seeing me, she smiles and motions me to come to the table. Michael, you'll have to miss your flight tomorrow. I've chartered a private yacht, and it's going to take us to this small island I'm renting. Shall we enjoy what we found in the jungle? With that, she hands me a cold drink, winks at me, and says, Go ahead, live dangerously, have it on the rocks.